In today's video, I'm going to be explaining inequalities. So if you are struggling with inequalities and you are a student between grade 10 to 12, this video should be good for you. I especially recommend it for grade 12 students. So the very first step for inequalities that you need to follow is to write the expression so that it resembles a quadratic expression. So x squared minus 4 resembles this general expression ax squared plus bx plus c. And you can see that x squared is x squared there, a is equal to 1, even though it's not written. This means that if a is equal to 1, of course, this means that a is greater than 0 because 1 is greater than 0, and therefore you would have a concave up graph if you were to draw a graph of this expression. And you can see that c is equal to -4 and b is equal to 0 because you don't have a coefficient of x. Now let's continue. Now you will have to factorize this. So if you factorize x squared minus 4, you're going to get x minus 2 and x plus 2. If you don't know how to factorize, I'm going to create a video explaining factorization so that you can go check it if you want to understand how I got this answer here. But the most important part of this video is not about factorization, it's about answering this question. So I assume that many of you know how to factorize already. Okay, so when you have this step here, let's call this step 1. So what is going to be step 2? Step 2 would be to draw a diagram. And remember, if you don't draw this diagram, you will lose marks. Because we know that a is equal to 1, therefore a is greater than 0 and concave up, if we were to draw an expression for x squared minus 4, we would have something like this. We would have something that resembles this. And remember, the top part of this graph is positive. Top part of this whole sketch is positive, not the graph in particular. And then the bottom part is negative. So to answer the question asked in this asked here, you need to find a region that will satisfy your equation. Now let's go back to the equation. The equation is x squared minus 4 is less than or equal to 0. So you want to find a region where this expression, this one, x squared minus 4 is less than or equal to 0. If you have an equality sign here, it means that you have to include the roots. So you're going to put dots here. You put dots here because of this inequality sign here. And secondly, because this expression is less than 0. When that expression, what we want is x values where this expression is less than 0. Where this expression is less than 0, it's at the bottom. It's here. If we wanted the region where this expression is greater than 0, we would choose the top. But we want the region where x squared minus 4 is less than 0. It's at the bottom. Always, if you have an expression that is less than 0, you're going to put a circle at the bottom. If you have an expression that is greater than 0, you're going to put a circle on top. Okay, now that we've put a circle at the bottom, we want to know the region of the graph itself that is below 0. That is, in other words, below the x-axis, because this is the x-axis. It is this region here. This region here is the only part of this whole graph that is below 0. So what you want to do is to find these roots first before you can answer the question. So now let's find the root. We have x minus 2, so x minus 2 is equal to 0, and therefore x is going to be 2. So we have 2 there. And we have x plus 2 is equal to 0, therefore x is going to be equal to -2. We have -2 there. So the answer is, so that's going to be step 3. The answer will be, it's going to be all the values that are greater than -2 and all the values that are less than positive 2. It's exactly as you say it. The answer will include all these values here. So if you were to take each and every dot here, you'd find that its corresponding x value here is any number that's found between x is equal to negative 2 and x is equal to 2. And that's how you would do it. Now I'm going to do another example to make sure that everyone understands. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to put the equality sign here, because the original question had this. So we must make sure that we put it as it is here. Okay, this is the second example. Here we are given x squared minus 3x minus 18 is greater than 0. Again, this resembles ax squared plus bx plus c. You can see it resembles this expression. And of course, a is greater than 0 because a is equal to 1. There is a 1 there even though it's not written. Because a is greater than 0, we know that our graph is going to look something like this. Now let's go to step 1. Step 1 involves factorizing this. So basically, we're going to have this. We're going to have x plus 3 here and x minus 6 there. And what we want is to also draw our diagram, step 2. We already know that our diagram will look something like this because a is positive, a is greater than 0 in other words. And we know that the top part of the diagram is positive and the bottom part of the diagram is negative. Now we want to choose the region where the graph is satisfied. So we go back to the original equation. If you look at the original equation, this graph is greater than 0. So we want the region where this graph is greater than 0. Now, the region where this graph is greater than 0 is the positive side. So it's always the positive side, right? If it was less than 0 here, if we had the sign, the less than sign here, then we would choose the region below. But because we have the greater than sign, we're going to choose the region above. Now that we've chosen the region above, which part of the graph, the actual graph, is actually above? We can clearly see that the part of the graph that is above is this one. Every other part of the graph is below, but we're not interested in that because the question wants the part of this graph that is above 0, greater than 0. This is where the graph is greater than 0. This is where the graph is less than 0. You see? It's easy. So now, before we answer the question, by the way, this is step 2. Step 3. So before we answer the question on step 3, we need to find the roots. But because we have a greater sign, there's no equality below it, we're going to have an open circle here. And secondly, we want to know what these values will be. So we're going to take x plus 3, equate it to 0, and therefore x is going to be equal to negative 3. That's a plus. And then we're also going to have x minus 6 equal to 0, and then therefore we're going to have x is equal to 6. So we have x is equal to 6 and x is equal to negative 3. Now that we have these values, you have to listen to me carefully on this one because many people don't get it. We know that we already know the region that we are interested on in this graph. It's this one here and this one here. Now, how do we write the answer? Now, if you look at this graph here, you will find that it's going upwards to infinity. It's just that there's no space, but you can see that it's going upwards. And as it goes upwards, let's say, for example, we were to choose this point here. it would correspond with a certain x value, maybe -4. If we were to choose this point here, it would correspond with a negative value, maybe -5 or 7. And then if we were to choose this point here, it would correspond with maybe -8. I don't know. But then it's going to correspond with a number that's becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So because of that, we say that in our answer, the values of x that are less than 3, x is less than 3. For all values of x that are less than 3, the graph will remain above it will remain above the x-axis. So the graph will always be satisfied by all these values here. And these values here are found where the x of the graph is less than -3. So as you move up here, the negative values are also decreasing towards -infinity. So it's all the x values that are less than 3, -3. Or, which is part of the answer, all the values here that you would have that are going to positive infinity. In other words, x, let me change here, x is greater than 6. So for all the values of x that are greater than 6 that you would get, let's say for example here, that would be maybe, that would correspond with 7, here that would correspond with 8, here that would correspond with 9, this would correspond with 10 here. So for all these values on the positive side of the graph would be above the x-axis. In other words, the graph would be greater than 0. That's why we put x is greater than 6 as a solution. If you like my explanations, feel free to comment in the comment section, like the video, subscribe, share it with friends if you want to. That will help me a lot as well. And for more videos, just go to the second video by tapping on the pop-up screen here. Will be